Okay, test, test, test. Hopefully the audio is good. All right. What's up, everybody? This is Mike Worth, and I am re-recording a lecture that I gave to our faculty during the Technology Tools Happy Hour that's put on by the digital learning and instructional design folks at Queens, which we are so gracious to have. So thanks to Melissa McCartney and Acacia Salmons, Jennifer Dixon, for really just hosting an amazing event. And yeah, we're going to record this now and capture some of the information and so folks can re-access this at any point. So the point of today was for me to come out of the AI shadows and to share with y'all really how I've been integrating AI into my teaching practice as well as my artistic practice. And I've just really been finding that I've been able to save a lot of time, and it's been able to scaffold me in a lot of ways that allow me to be a better self. So hopefully you guys can appreciate this. Always happy to take questions at any point. You can always email me. And yeah, just that maybe you can adopt just this thought pattern, if not these specific techniques, just this thought pattern, right, about the future. It's important, right? We need to really be modeling a lot for our students. So this might be for the first time for some folks jumping into this, really kind of appreciating, how AI has really made a huge splash and has really, for some of us infiltrated and invaded a lot of areas of our lives. But, we want to have knowledge as power, and we want to not feel so scared, right, about these crazy things. And evolve with the evolution of this technology in this era. So here we go. So welcome. This is my presentation. I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that. Okay. And I chose this quote, number one, to help folks connect to a fearful place when it comes to thinking about AIs, right? This is HAL 9000 from 2001, Space Odyssey, the Stanley Kubrick movie, right? But the Arthur C. Clarke novel about a AI that figures out that human beings are really like the biggest threat to the mission of going to space and exploring some phenomena that's happening around Jupiter, right? Which later we learn is a black hole. Sorry, I want to ruin it for you. But also too, in that, like, we're using AI wrong. A lot of folks, when I have conversations with them, will say, oh, I asked AI this question the other day and it just spit out some junk, right? And it was like, and my head's nodding, yeah, it should, right? I said, well, what did you ask it? We talk about how their prompt was formed. And essentially what I kind of realized is that folks are trying to use AI like a hammer when AI should be more like a screwdriver, right? And, you could attempt to do those things. They might be somewhat successful, but they're not the right tool for the job. So what I want to do is help us think about using AI in a way that's the right tool for the job, right? That helps us do things better, right? That scaffolds us, the things I was talking about before. So here we go. So we've done a great job of scaring ourselves when it comes to AI, right? And that's no help from science fiction and movies and all these things. The PDF that we've made available has this link here, and you can click to see the full collection of some of these things. So these are AIs that we've seen in the past that have really scared us, right? So of course, HAL on the top left-hand corner, right? Literally doesn't allow an astronaut back in and cuts off his oxygen, lets him float out in space. I mean, it was really scary at the time. If you saw the movie, right, you were like, oh my gosh, computers are terrible. And at this time, folks didn't have nothing stronger than a calculator. I mean, there were mainframes, but the average person didn't have a computer, right, let alone a smartphone. Next one in the middle, right, if you don't recognize that illustration, that's supposed to look like Sean Young who played one of the replicants, right, in Blade Runner. If you've not ever seen that movie from the 80s, dystopian novel, right, about AI robots who, commit crimes, and are they property, and there's a lot of cool things. The False Maria comes from, if you can guess this, you get 10 points, right? Metropolis, old black and white Fritz Lang movie, German expressionist film. Agents are from The Matrix. Gort, that's another old school one. Cool. The Day the Earth Stood Still, 50s sci-fi classic. And then also redone with Keanu Reeves, right? In, I forget when, the 2000s, something like that. Day the Earth Stood Still. And then, of course, the Terminator, right? The ultimate AI death machine. So, yeah, the havoc that these fine characters have played, on our emotional stratosphere is real. It's traumatic, right? But then we also have balance, where there's good things. These tend to be subservient AI, right? Wally, Beloved, right? David from the movie AI. Data from Star Trek, R2-D2, right? Don't need to explain that one. Johnny Five, you might not know this one unless you're a Steve Guttenberg film lover, and Ali Sheedy, right? Short Circuit, which had these drone type robot type things that shot lasers. Cool. It's the 80s. Jarvis, right? Marvel. So we do have good things, but not as many as the bad. So that's a fun list to just kind of like understand, like, where does our relationship with AI come from? And when it comes to what we do, this is important stuff. This is where really, like, my exploration has revealed some truisms to me that I find to be, interesting questions when entering into spaces. We really, as faculty, our job is to help our students understand how this new stuff is going to impact what they do in the future, and prepare for it in the best way possible, right? Like that's our job. We can't do anything beyond that. We can't ensure that they're going to get a job, or ensure that, like, even stuff we're doing is necessarily going to be how it is in the workforce, because the feelings we have about AI usage versus how business feels is two different things, right? So these are questions we have to have conversations and ask these with our students, right? And like go through this together with them. But the thing that's really important is just like, when we're scared, they're looking at our faces, they're scared. So, we need to understand that, like, if we don't know, just say we don't know, like we can look it up. We can find things and, like, make it a lesson. Why not explore something together with your students? And I think that's great, right? Like, but also our attitude. We have to be, we got to be strong. We have to be, even if we are scared, if we're like, wow, the implications of this is way larger than I thought. Of course, be open and transparent about that, but do understand that, like, you're also feeling things in certain ways, and students are accessing this stuff for the first time as young people. So having them understand that you're one of many, right, is really important in terms of things, right? So an attitude, right? Like, I'm excited about AI, but I'm not going to tell a student they have to do it and then shame them if they're not, right? Like, if students have said, I'm not interested in using AI, and I said, awesome, like, then don't. But just, I want you to understand that these things are here and they're going to be out there when you get out into the workforce. That's it. Just give them that place to drink from, right? And allow them to go as they wish. But, that's what I'm saying, is that comes from attitude and how we approach and model this behavior. It's really important. Literacy, this is something that we constantly talk about. We need to have this at Queens, and I've heard folks say before, and I want to echo that we need, right, AI literacy as a competency in our general education, even within our majors. Whether AI is directly connecting to what you do or not, it's still going to impact the world, right? So at least having a telescopic view of that on your discipline's horizon is valuable, right? Know what's coming. So that's really important. So we need to really engage this and understand that like literacy comes from dialogue. And if we can learn and teach and go through a process together with students, I feel like that's way stronger than if we're just, trying to uh, put all our efforts into things like prevention, right? If we do that, we're just building walls at that point. And then every year the wall has to be taller and thicker and more impenetrable. And that seems to be like an endless battle, like an arms race. So I'd rather kind of take on the collaborative approach, the design charrette, so to speak, right? Where you kind of work in a group and split tasks and come together and really forge creativity. Forging is a great word because it means it happens in a place that is through heat, right? We don't want to replace you, right? I don't want to be replaced. I'm a teacher too. So I'm an artist too. I don't, I'm not terrified that AI can do great illustration, right? Like better than me, better than I can ever be. It doesn't scare me because like, that's not what I do art for. That's not exactly why I understand that I have this ability to communicate, right? Visually. It's about solving problems, right? I use my art to solve problems, whether that's working with a client or studying something or, developing an idea of my own, a project of my own. That's what it is, okay? So, I understand all these things and they feel like threats at times. But I have to remember that, like, again, I'm not here to be this pure producer of just art. That's not exactly why I'm here, right? I use it as a language. So that's my approach on how that goes, right? And this is coming from somebody who wanted very much as a young person to be an illustrator and to work in the New York illustration market, right? And it's like I worked my butt off training, taking courses, cartooning, how many credits I took in undergrad and graduate school to really refine my aesthetic skills and even beyond that, right? It's like, now I'm in this world. Right, it's shock and awe. It really feels scary, but I've now learned that I'm a communicator, right? And I'm a problem solver. And I have these methods to do it. And human beings have all different configurations of ways to be problem solving communicators. So whether you're a writer, a dancer, or anything, you still go through a development process to solve problems. So I really feel like these tools are amazing at helping us do that because they help us track and stay organized, right? And then see what maybe we don't see within our own data and our own output. So yeah, today is about how do we make AI work for us better in the things that we got to do, right? Tasks that normally can become grinding and nominal, right? And then lastly is like what the future, we have to be thinking about like what are AI powered versions of our current career lanes that we talk about with our students. We still talk about that despite not being a place that ensures job connection. We do have career pathways that we do prescribe, right, or talk about. So we owe it to our students in that space. One thing I want to recommend to everybody that I did, $31, right? Get some professional development funds. Perfect thing to do. Sign up for this Coursera. This was a great one. I did it and it was the first one I did and it completely changed my thinking process on how GPT and LLMs and AI could be used for teachers, right? And I appreciated the reading because it talked about ethics and it talked about concerns and it talked about cheating, right? And like all the stuff that really spiraled up when AI first came on the scene. But then it gives you how-tos, right? Like, what do you want to do now to move forward, right? And it's really good at kind of, they use the example of a BATNA, right? A business, right? The best alternative to was it null, forget, it. Your lowest negotiation point. So essentially this class was really inspirational, right? It comes from UPenn, Wharton School. I found this to be really strong. So I would do this, right? Like take a course like this. Don't just listen to me right now and be like, oh, I'm happy about things because I've put this stuff in my brain, right? This is a great starting point. A lot of people ask, where do I start? Here. This is it, right? All the things that like I'm going to talk about today, this talks about. So here's some a little bit of investigation that I did here when it talks about what really AI is. When I'm talking about it being a hammer, or we use it as a hammer when it's really a screwdriver, that there's certain things that people ask it to do, and when they see it fail at it, you know, they're like, look, this hammer is terrible at screwdriving. Yes, exactly. So these are the things that when we know what AI can do well now, and we can keep up with this, right, as time goes on, because this list will evolve, we can start to now take advantage of its strengths instead of it trying to engage its weaknesses, becoming frustrated, and then, you know, putting out that like these tools are worthless, right, or not smart. Okay, so that's what I want to really focus on here, right? And there's sources over here. Check this stuff out, right? This is the stuff that I read and I put together. It's just a table of information, right? So I was able to, in the preparation of this, put this table together in seconds because I went and did all the research on the things, I copy and pasted all the links, found the cool stuff that I was interested in. I did an old school research on the internet, right? And in doing so, I was then able to use the AI to help me put this into a table, right? So like, first and foremost, it's my formatting mule. It helps me in formatting all the time. But really interestingly, look, pattern recognition is number one on this list, right? So like if that's the number one thing that folks are saying AI can do, then all right, cool. How can we use that in what we're exploring, right? In what we're studying, and things that we do inside of our own majors, right? That's important. Is it data, right? Is it style, you know, in terms of art and design? Is it melodies with music, you know? Is it research patterns, word usage? There's so many patterns that exist in our lives, and I feel like the discovery of them is wonderful, right? It's just like discovering new things, and that's something that AI is amazing at. So the deductionists out there, right? Folks who want to try every combination of note or color or, you know what I mean, like any sort of system, right? It allows this amazing synthesis of systems. It's wonderful. Divergent thinking, AKA hallucinations, right? That's the nomenclature that we've used for AI when it comes up with stuff, is that it's just like, well, whatever, right? So it just drops different random things and juxtaposes in a funky way information, right? Which is fun as an artist. It's like very poetic. But this is important because we don't want to get rid of that stuff from AI. We like this because this is where AI is now taking, because divergent thinking is what you do at the beginning of the creative process, right? You start with a problem and then you branch off into these pie in the sky, no budget. We're going to do whatever we got to do to get stuff done before coming back to convergent thinking, right? Which is like, is that going to work? Do we have budget for that? You know, we start to ask real logistical rubber meets the road type of questions, and ideas fall off, right? Clearly. But it's because divergent thinking, and if you do a lot of divergent thinking, you can then prune in a way that's like really great, and you can make such a healthy concept out of like getting rid of the dead or the impractical in the convergent stage. So it's amazing, and then the list goes from there. But look at the bottom. Look at what it doesn't do well, right? Originality, emotional insight. It's yeah. So we shouldn't be sitting here, and the inevitability that that will get better is probably going to happen, right? I've heard that argument too, but it's not here yet. It's not even here next week. So let's leverage what's working really strongly, right? And then, yeah, if that stuff comes around the block, wouldn't it be great to be ready for it? To understand all these other parts of what AI is amazing at. So that way, then you're really not out of a job. Do you know what I'm saying? So like, yeah, that's what makes me less scared of AI in terms of what some of the vitriol like this that like I've heard about it, you know, in terms of it being, because it's people are taking what it's gonna be, AKA the Terminator and futuristic AIs and stuff, and then mashing it with now. And it's like, well, we're just John Connor, really young, and we're witnessing the unfolding of that apocalyptic future. So we should stop it now, like, yeah, cool. I just, again, I'd rather just really learn about what this stuff does and try to really use it well as a screwdriver. Just, sorry, but that's how I want to approach this. Yeah, I respond, I hear critique and problems and those sorts of things. And as a designer, naturally, because I follow the creative process, the design process, right? There's a universal design process, and it is identify a problem and then start to ideate, come up with solutions. What can we do about this? And sometimes in ideation, you have to dig deeper into the problem and understand it and systematize it and say, wow, during the process of when students would use AI, for example, or when students are in the development process of a paper, let's say, right, from idea to finished product, let's map that out. Let's understand where in the process sometimes students cheat, for example, or feel the pressure to cheat. It's generally around that artifact time, right? The production of it. Time runs out. They feel unconfident. Something gets in their way and in their head and pushes them to feel like they can deal with that. So for me, I'm interested in the idea of creative development systems, and using AI has been a tremendous scaffold for like how to understand my own creativity. I wanted to really try this, so I've been experimenting with this and doing research on creative development systems. Now that relates to, because there's so much of this in UX. If you're in the UX discipline, we're constantly looking at different psychology, different science, different measurement systems, different ways to look at data, how AI can impact user experience. I mean, that's it. It's even now merged with CX, customer experience. So you really start to think about, just like we would in UX, see students or users go through a process of, I need to send an email to email sent, right? That all the stages of that process. You can do the same thing for a customer, right? Like think about how students enter into the Queen's universe, right? They are advertised to, they check out our website, they take a tour, they do all these kind of entrance points, and then they eventually become students. But that's a process. So like think about, how do students go through the process of building a paper from scratch to full on artifact product. So here, this has made me feel and understand, after studying these different systems, these are the different claims. The 4C model is something I'm incredibly interested in. Kaufman is the creator of it. I've put a link there to the paper. And then on the next slide, you'll see the example. There's full citations on there. But they talk about this myth, right, that like students are, or people in general, are just naturally born with creativity, and we have to somehow weed out the creative and the non-creative in the elementary system, and then put them through this development through middle school, high school, and then college. But when you get to college, you do get this second chance almost to kind of like say, hey, you know what, I am creative, but the system didn't maybe think I was. And like psychologically, that's huge for people to get over. And once you kind of understand that if creativity is a system and a development system, well, then you can do the push-ups and lift the weights and the jumping jacks in creativity to develop those muscles too. And that's absolutely true. And if we use something like AI, we can actually scaffold the creative process. All right, so let's talk a little bit about that. The best connection here is this, the fourth point here is that using AI during ideation and feedback stages of the creative process, right, absolutely makes you more successful. Why? Because if your quantity of divergent thought is big, right, like we do things with students where we'll ask them for 18, 12, 9, 6, 3, and 1 ideas sometimes, right, in terms of first coming up with that first set of like really strong things and then boiling it down, right, and evolving ideas through an iterative process. That really you get the most amazing stuff. And the students who at the beginning who can't reach that benchmark, right, of those ideas, they have a tougher time going through that process because they have less to work with, right? So like you want to yield as much as you can with the divergent process. So this is essential. And students who come in, if they have any sort of creative, we'll say block or lack of confidence, that's going to immediately slow them down. They're not going to know what to do. They're not going to know the next move or how to recover, right? So in that moment, we can do an intervention. We can say, okay, hey, listen, here's where you are in this process. Because if students don't understand that creativity spans a spectrum versus like, it being some quasi thing, it's hard to say, well, what is creative, right? And in art and design, I know specifically in graphic design on our rubrics, we have a creativity criteria. So like that is evaluated. How do you measure that, right? So for students, we have to take them through a process to understand, well, what is creativity? And here is an example of the 4C model. This is a wonderful handout. And again, I've given this in the PDF. You guys can all access this. You can see on the bottom, the creativeschools.eu hosts this. It's a fantastic resource. So there's 4 stages of creativity, right? They've got mini C on the left, little c, pro C, and big C, right? Most of us are going to never get to big C. Big C's your Mozarts, your Nikki Giovanni's, your Maya Angelou's, your Picasso's, just like culture makers, like folks who just understand this amazing creativity that impacts culture and people feel accessible and connected to. It's, yeah, right. It explains here. Nobel Prize winners, right? It's just, yeah, it lasts. It seems remarkable. But then we go down the list, right? And Pro C, this is about discipline. So me as a graphic designer, I need to be able to sell art, right? Graphic logos, websites, the aesthetic, things like that. So if I can be really creative in my discipline, this is considered professional. See, I get paid for it, right? It's considered valuable. This company invested in me, and they're going to invest in their own company by putting out this new graphical thing, right? A product, object, advertisement, right? Something like that. So that's that, right? That could be so good that all of a sudden that becomes big C. Like maybe Shepard Fairey, who painted our mural outside of Burwell Hall, or outside of Gambrell Hall, may have crossed over to big C by creating the Hope poster for Barack Obama, right? So if you remember the Obama campaign, that famous poster that was the minimal colors, it's Shepard Fairey, a living artist, who did our mural. And that could be an example of like a hit, right? Just kind of cutting through the mustard there. And then we go down into like more personal creativity. All of a sudden now we have little c. So like little c might be, a parent who decorates the house for the holidays in the most beautiful way, right? Or does something really cool with their yard and they win best yard, right? Or, you know what I'm saying? Like just they dress amazingly. They do things that impact their world, their community, right? Not necessarily seeking money, not necessarily seeking fame, but they do it anyway, right? It's this sort of creative thing that connects to people, right? That seems relevant to people. So you ask, what is relevancy to people? And then down the line, the most simple form of creativity, the one you and I have all the time, we might be even having it right now, right, is mini C. Mini C is like when you get an idea and it's like in your head and you're like, that's amazing, right? You're like, whoa. You're like, nobody's ever thought of fill in the blank, right? How many times have you done that? Mini C happens when you're driving. Mini C happens when you're in the shower and you're like, oh, and you get the best idea, right? I'm going to totally do X, right, and fill in the blank. And then what I love is that you get examples of these things, but then it talks about like, how do you develop this? Like I'm saying all this like, oh, we can creatively develop and do exercises and blah, blah, blah. But there are non-arbitrary exercises, right? So how to get to the next level. Starting from mini C, little c can be reached after repeated attempts and encouragement. So the first thing that mini C can do to get to little c, show it to another person, get feedback, right? Get critique during the development process. So that way, you know, if what you're doing sounds good to other people before you invest in the development of it. Because otherwise, if you do something that's not useful to people, right, you just put a lot of time and effort into materials that might be a waste, right? So prototyping, doing things to allow people to imagine, wow, what is this thing like? So anyhow, this is really important. This is why I use creative development models to like really understand how does a student go from entering into a space, learning something from me, and then taking it to where they can be self-sufficient and produce artifacts and products with intelligence, right? You could boil it down to that. So simply, I'm doing art, you might be doing history or science or, you know, communications, religion, something like that. Same core process, right? That you can follow. And I love this. This comes from the UX Institute, Interaction Design. Great place to learn. They have great AI courses as well in design. This is the double diamond. And the double diamond talks about how ideation really works. So if I were to meet with people and say, we're going to brainstorm, right? Like, how do you brainstorm? If I were to ask you, like, you know, how would you do it? You might sit and draw, you know, like a bubble chart or whatever, and have just people riff or whatever. Well, you could follow this process and do this like kind of organized team approach where folks can go off and do that and then come together and really like and mesh together any crazy idea. And it's wonderful. You start to see the process of design, which is try, fail. And every time you try, you get a little bit closer towards the solution. And fail is always like a little, you know, and the more you do that, right, it's progress. So we really like to be as iterative and as agile in the beginning, right? And that's where AI can really serve us well. And in this part right here, right, in the problem, okay, even understanding things. You know, I was given a job to paint a mural in Houston, right? I'd never been to Houston. They wanted me to do something that celebrated the space city, right? And it's like, you're asking this dude who lives in Charlotte, who's from Long Island, right, to do that. So I did research on all this. I talked to people, right, obviously, because I'm a human being. Right? But when I did come up with ideas, I asked AI, right, like, help me understand if I'm getting this right, or if I'm being trite, right, or if I'm putting something on the nose. I needed to know that, right? And that was a helpful thing. So before I spoke to folks that I would ask questions to, I'd bounce it around with ChatGPT just to really see, like, you know, am I getting this right? You know, I would ask it to see my holes, right, the blanks in my ideas. I found that to be amazingly helpful, and I was able to be very successful with the project. So more layout here in the handout about how AI can be integrated. I did a little research on that, and again, used GPT to compile it into a nice table for us, right, to enjoy and to explore this matrix. So really cool things about how folks can develop the idea, right, using AI. But a little bit about my background. People have asked me, Mike, why are you so interested in AI? Why do you think it's so great? And it really comes from my early days as a student and being in the idea of design and technology. I entered into the Parsons School of Design, new school in Manhattan. You know, when I was a young lad, right from undergrad, I went for my MFA in design and technology. And I was very interested in what the program talked about because it wanted to merge technology use and design use. And because of digital platforms at the time, you know, that was becoming very much more common in arts, right? Graphic arts, graphic design, where I started my undergrad. And yeah, I became very interested in this idea of generative art. So using the computer, like leveraging code to create cycles, right? To make decisions, conditions, play with arrays and variables. You know, these were just like, whoa, concepts to me. Like I should have paid more attention in math. You know, trigonometry, gosh, I wish I had really gotten into that in high school and college because I use it daily when I animate now. I have to make things smooth and have physics, right? And look and follow the principles of animation, right? But over my career, I've made some generative projects using code and JavaScript, Java. Excited to experiment more with things like Python now. But that's in my blood. So I've always been excited about this, is like the idea of generativeness, that the computer can produce things, right? Graphic designers for a long time, we've been using this dummy copy called Lorem Ipsum. You may have heard of it before, but when we have to, we work for a magazine, we do editorial design, for example, or a website, you know, as another example, you would use that to populate pages with dummy text in lieu of a real writer writing text. So that way that process could advance at the same time. We would use dummy text until, you know, it was time to add actual written copy, edited copy, right? So that's something that, like, you know, it's been a useful tool kind of in that space for a while. Also, like personally, as a learner, I'm neurodivergent. I have ADHD, right? I have, gosh, if you know about ADHD, it's easy to get off track. It's easy to lose focus, and you can get very frustrated if you don't know how to handle it. And it's been wonderful to use this like while I'm as a second brain, right? It's like I can stay with it, be like, oh yeah, right? Or I could ask it, what were we talking about? And it'll help me get back on track. It's really good at asking questions based on our conversation because it's listening, right? Thankfully, because I wasn't, right? Well, I was, but it, you know, the memory wiped too fast. As I mentioned, I'm really excited about it for using ideation. Ever since it's come out, right? I've been like, as soon as I generated my first AI image, I said, oh, I want to paint that, right? I was like, ooh, this is great. Just like when the camera came out. I read this article by this German philosopher, Walter Benjamin, right? Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction. And he talks about when the camera comes out, how it like devastated the art world. Well, really, like the people who were the most upset were the painters who weren't really at the top of their game, right? Who aren't the most real, right? Or realist in terms of art that was selling at the time. Because now here comes this camera and it can do better what a human being can't do as well, right? That is very threatening. So that made people very upset, akin to what we are hearing very much today, right? But then eventually the camera found its place in culture, and photographs became its own aesthetic. And there are, even since, hyper realists, right? People who have gone beyond realism, right? The camera pushed them. It became this scaffold because it was this benchmark, right? Like drum machines has made music more syncopated and more quantized because we can lock in the groove. When earlier recordings were just recorded with folks in a room, so you got every little imperfection, you know, there wasn't mixing, anything like that. So things have kind of ratcheted up the precision of creativity in a lot of ways because of that idea of tracking and connectivity. I've always wanted an AI mic. Since my generative art days, I've tried to make like you know, art that like could generate things that are in my head and to push the ideas. I'm going to share with you in a minute kind of what these things were. So I got excited about when I learned about fine-tuning models, where you can train base models, image models on your own work, your own face, your dog, you know, like stuff that's yours, you know, effectively. And I can run all of that locally on my machine, right? So we're going to talk about those types of things. And it just saves me a ton of time, okay, in procedural tasks. It really, really does. So here's an example. This is Diffusion B. This is software that I run on my computer. That's a image generator. It doesn't talk to the internet. It costs me nothing. It's totally free. And I was able to train Worth style. You can see here. And then I type in Worth style as part of my prompt. And it even understands capital M Mike, me, right? So you can see in the images like those, that's all instances of me. Mind you, I did lower the sampling steps pretty low. So it's these are fastly generated. But y'all, I've got all this great stuff now to like get ideas from. I could just keep hitting generate until I see something that I really like, or a piece of something. A lot of times I'll see a piece, like something tiny in the art. I'm like, ooh, I want that, right? Like maybe it's this, ooh, sorry. Maybe it's this little piece, this kind of fun meshing, that's in a lot of my work. So that's really neat. I might lasso that out and then Photoshop stuff collage later, right? So I'm taking here art that's mine, right, generated, and then now hyper accelerating ideation allows me to experiment and push ideas that normally would take me too long, right, to really invest the time in. And yeah, it allows me to like explore many passions at once. I find that to be really, really fantastic. So these are not final products, right? These are pieces maybe to a final product, but these are where the ideas start. Okay, so like this is where that is really happening for me. So let's rewind to pre-AI era, right? Here is my first generative piece that I did outside of grad school, the Holzer machine, which is based on Jenny Holzer's truisms, the messages that used to be in Times Square in the 70s that she wrote, but she put them on like, the Trinitron, which at the time was like revolutionary screen because it was so big and pixeled. So what I did was I made a generative version, meaning that I have this essentially this formula, right? That is the output is a sentence. So here I'll show it to you working. And the sentence is broken into three parts. So it's kind of like the subject at the beginning, the verb or the action, and then like the noun at the end. So by taking the sentence and it's stuck that way, right? Always. It was hard for me to come up with that and make it work. But this allowed me to then create three databases that then have all of those sentence fragments in it. And then all of a sudden, those sentence fragments get pushed together and made into a sentence. So the GIF is ended here, but that's how that works. And then I had projected this back in 2004 on the side of this old Roman palace in Split, Croatia, at a really fun festival called Splitski Media and Film Festival. Really, really great experience. Another piece that I did was I'm a hip hop fan and I love also electronic music. And both of those styles of music come from sampling, right? Or really have a strong basis in sampling or electronic rhythm in electronic machines in their production. So I was interested in a lot of the experiments that I was learning about from graphic designers like Wassila Kandinsky. So Wassila Kandinsky did a lot of really amazing abstract geometric art. It's the kind of art like when you go to the museum and you go like, that's $1 million painting. Like my kid could have done that, like that type of modern art, you know what I'm talking about? But that like those became like notation. So I started to think about, and I'll show you all here. Here's the video. This is a synthesizer. Got it. But what this does is essentially, we've all used music software before or used a MP3 player, and we've seen a histogram that shows the volume of a song, or even notation. If you read music, you get that, right? Or you've played Guitar Hero. Sure. So in a matrix, we can put things like notes and time and measures and all of that stuff and have it make sense. So what I did was I thought, well, this is a visual structure, and that like when someone's eye scans across it, or when the playhead scans across a histogram, right, or a needle on a record, it is that's the action point. So I thought like, well, what if this space could kind of move around, and like if I put in a bunch of samples, this playhead could travel across the screen and then boom, bump, right? The computer understands that the line and the shape have interacted, right? They've crossed over in terms of overlapping in space. So we can trigger an event, and that event is sample playing. What I've also done is the shapes that are at the bottom are that's lower volume, and then shapes at the top have higher volume. So at every few seconds, the shapes reorganize and find a new arrangement, and the playhead all the while is running. So it's just this like constant development of composition, right? It's like it could make you crazy, but it could also have little moments of brilliance. So sometimes I'd love to just kind of set this thing up. I had the pleasure of showing this at the Chelsea Art Center in late 2000s, but then earlier at the Row Media Biennale in Wrocław, Poland, where electronic arts are like a huge place. So I was honored to show this piece inside of an old castle, like in this like column corner. It was wonderful. This was back in '07. Really had a great experience doing that. So this was fun. It was, you know, this piece developed and lived and did all these like wild and crazy things. Then I have this piece here, which is called Constructivisto. And this, once I started to kind of learn about Kandinsky and that inspiration had hit me in terms of like, wow, that seems like notes and me trying to make sense of that art. I started to then look at the compositional side because I had learned that this software that I started using allowed me to make prints, that I could have the computer like generate these compositions that you're seeing unfold here, and then I could just hit save, 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 and save them to my hard drive. And all of a sudden now, right, like I had this endless like generator of art, and I was like, man, this is just wow, I should do something with this. So I put the project on my website. I started to like sell prints and all that stuff. And then I got the attention of some professors at UNC Charlotte. And there was a project that we all worked on together called Dance.Draw. And really cool. It was received a National Science Foundation Creative IT, and then also the CHI Institute. It won a grant also, the project. So fun experience putting all this stuff together. But it is constantly regenerating and reorganizing itself into these compositions. You know, this idea comes from the artist themselves, and that they sat and said, all right, well, what else could I do? So they started to use modular shapes and make a composition with shapes and then print that, right? They could put ink on things and then just print it. Or they could, you know, trace it out and then produce shapes however they were doing it back then, right? Whatever their style or their, however that meant, that was meaningful to them. So this is Constructivisto, and this is something I'm still working on today. This is the latest incarnation of it, which has been a lot of fun, right? Making the shapes animate, make it into a moody kind of piece. I like it, right? And this allowed me to, right, this was the project I was mentioning before with UNCC. These are the two dance performances that I participated in as the digital artist. Mischief of Musculus, where dancers had sensors, 3D gyroscopic sensors in their hands, like our phones, and they were able to control kinetic animations, right? That were generative. So every time they did something, it was new, right? Which was wonderful. And then in the other one, Whispers to Ophiuchus, similar, right? The body motion was able to inspire action and the formation of the different patterns you see in the background. Fun projects, right? Really exciting to think about the idea of kinetics and generativeness, right? And animation and motion and aesthetics, all in one. So really great. But back to this, right? The last piece I put on my list of why I use AI, it's this, right? It's like, I want to have it do my laundry instead of me, you know, getting time back to do my own dishes. No, right? Be there to assist, not to take over. That's really important. So here are some interesting whys about AI entering into my space that I use on now a pretty regular basis, right? Especially over the last year. I've been writing about this in my self-evaluation, right? It's like teaching innovations. So I've had a great time having students do simulations, right? Especially with clients. So I'll create a chatbot, and that has the mentality of a client. And then, and I used to do this with students. I would actually be a fake client through our discussion thread, and I would throw on nomenclature and like act like, you know, a biography that I would make up about a client. And the students had to kind of, you know, we would role play, okay? But now the students, we can have the chatbot be anything we want. You know, I don't have to act. My acting is terrible. So this one We can make it have certain priorities, for example, by pre-programming it, right? Next, we love to, in our UX and interactive design courses, is debug and code, right? We're constantly writing code to create interfaces and user experiences, and we need to make that through technology, digital tech, and developing all this stuff takes time and focus and energy, right? So being able to have these tools has really allowed students to become more accelerated at their coding, right? Yeah, I like to call it like the Grammarly of coding, right? It's spell check in a lot of ways. Again, you can have it do what you want, or you could have it not do, right? You can have it be an assist. This is an important thing that I want to say is that like in the things that I create, right? I'm always telling my students is that an artifact, something that comes out of AI should never be used, right? Unless you have pure, authentic, like that LLM or that image model is 100% trained on you and you alone. There's no way that we could create fully authentic, fully original, right? Or fully from us type of content. So word on the street is don't use artifacts that come out of AI tools for final output, right? That's academic dishonesty, right? That's not helping you. Okay. If we all agree that like what AI puts out is not strong, right? Then let's not reinforce that behavior. Let's go towards the opposite, right? So saying straight away that AI artifacts are not to be turned in, okay? That a human must intervene, right? There must be that is a starting point, right? And we can show that. We can absolutely show that. So I have students here with the supplemental support. So I have students use GPT, Copilot, GitHub, these sorts of things, right? And then as part of their, when they turn in everything at the end, they turn in their chat logs. So all of these tools, GPT, Copilot, GitHub, those things that we use, the students can just say export, boom, and it will show me their entire chat log. So I can see how they were developing, right? How they were sort of, where their mental state was, you know. I can ask them like, hey, what were you thinking at this moment, you know, during this process of talking to the chatbot? Why did you ask it this, right? It allows for that deeper sense of understanding through the process because that whole conversation is tracked. So it's really great. In addition to debugging coding, sorry, skipping over here, is vibe coding. Okay. So students, because of the scaffold, learn to sketch with coding. One of the things way back when I was a student at Parsons was we had this great software that was coding for artists called Design by Numbers. And that eventually became a full commercial project that like really helped people learn to code. But like, how do artists code, right? It's hard. You can't just like show up and do it. It's difficult, especially back then. But this tool was amazing because it was so simple that it lets you just think in terms of aesthetics. The engineers said, what do the artists need and what do they not need? Let's take away what they don't need to see and give them what they need to do. Right. So it became this sketch pad, and that's what vibe coding with AI allows us to do. So instead of using a sketchpad software, we can now use AI to help us. So in other words, the students come up with an idea, right? We'll use this in animation, and I'll say to the students, all right, I want you guys to ask the AI to help you create what looks like orbiting, like a moon orbiting the Earth, right? Earth in the center, two-dimensional orbit of the Earth, okay? So in doing so, right, the students then can take the idea, quickly ask a prompt, and then we like to put our chatbots into conversation mode. So I always tell chatbots that I create, don't give answers, even if a student like begs you. And they'll refuse. It says just consistently be a tutor, and that's it. And that's how you can turn off the using GPT or any LLM, you know, as a hammer, right? When you really need, when you're trying to use it as a hammer to screw something in, you need the screwdriver, right? I hope I remember my metaphor. So anyway, vibe coding is a lot of fun because it allows us to experiment. And at the same time, students can understand like how something is constructed because the GPT is going to ask you questions like, how did you set up your layers, for example, in our software, right? Because then the students can take the code and put it in, or they can say, hey, I've been working on this code and I think it's doing this, but is it? And then they can have that conversation with the AI about, better methods or their method to make it better. Image generation, right? Again, like we're talking about, students need for proof only. FPO is a acronym we have in graphic design that we use during the development of a printed collateral. And FPO could be that dummy text I described earlier, the lorem ipsum, or placeholder images. So for example, students will learn how to make placeholder images for websites and things like that. Or I've been instructing students about how to use things like generative fill in Photoshop, which uses ethically sourced imagery from Adobe's Firefly library. So if you use generative fill, you're paying, right? Part of the usage of Photoshop is that generative fill pulls from Adobe's stock imagery, just their own stock imagery, and I'm sure some Creative Commons imagery, right? Like we have to know what a duck is, like that would mean then that Adobe's library would have to have every conceivable image ever, but most likely images come from public domain as well as Adobe. So just to kind of put that into full context. Yeah. So then the students were able to create this kind of imagery, and those kinds of images can then be handed off to photographers, right? And those photographers could restage those images in reality, right? Because they'll see the lighting, the staging, the setup, like it's all there as what the client wants. So then the client can then take it, use it, right? With then a real photographer producing that imagery, right? And then lastly here is custom chatbots. I'm going to share with you all today. I made an agent for students to use for UX classes called Rux, right? The Rex UX bot. It's awesome. I'm going to show you guys there in a second. So these are the experiments that I've been working on the last few months, year, really since AI has come out, because I've just been so curious, because for me, it's just seemed like, wow, these are like the macros to make my life better. And I've just wanted to just do that ever since. So we'll go through, we'll talk about formatting, like let's please use this for formatting. We've talked about you do it, you fix it on Canvas, how we format our assignment sheets, investigating teaching standards like TILT and UDL, right, which Kevin Gannon and Megan Karansky have been wonderful at giving us as faculty. So like we can close that gap, right? And it's not just like, oh, you did it. Understand that like when you make all this stuff TILT and UDL accessible, you're making your entire course offering and content accessible to everybody. That's like putting in a ramp, right? Or an elevator in terms of the web, because now people can scan your documents even without being able to see, right? Like all levels of accessibility need to be met. And AI can help us do that. That's a really important thing. We can solve that issue, which I know, look, some of us view it as like, it's a lot of work. Y'all, I was able to TILT and UDL all my assignments in about 30 minutes, maybe 45 minutes. Because it was really just looking for like old ones. And I started to work on other classes and things like that. My syllabi, right? Like I can make all of that accessible, right? Truly accessible. That's important. My rubrics, I'm constantly generating rubrics that are now working with the student learning outcomes, major level learning outcomes for graphic design, as well as the learning outcomes for the course. So it's helped me be more cognizant of that and connection to those things. I enjoy how Canvas works with rubrics and objectives, course objectives. It's a neat system. I would encourage you to explore that and then see how using GPT can help you work with these things. Yes, quizzes. I'm going to show you a little hack I did with optical character recognition and the Notes app on my Apple phone to make that happen. The LLM that I tuned, that you can for free as well. And then also an analysis of student writing. That's an ongoing experiment with JD, right? Our wonderful friend. So here, let's get into it. Okay, so no joke. I was able to get all my assignments done and also get them to be you fix it, you do it compliant. So I know truly that Mike has fully accessible stuff,
right? So this is the equivalent of if the elevator's working, right, that day. We want to really make sure of all that stuff. Alt tags too. Y'all, you can put alt tags into image into any LLM even right now, right? You can ask it like, can you write an alt tag for me? And it will. Okay. There's great tools out there that help you do that. Even local ones. We're going to talk about that. Local meaning you don't use the internet. Your data isn't compromised, right? We can be strict with FERPA, right? We can really ensure that like the student experience is protected. So I always put here an example prompt for you. You can take this and modify it, but it's really important that you prompt this way. So here I've told the AI what it's an expert of, which is a nice list of things, right? It's like it's a job, a list of expertise that like I wish I was 1,000% skilled in. And then I put in some options, as well as then giving it the opportunity to reference real sources. Okay, that's really important, right? Is that I give it the actual sources to look at, not just what do you think, what's on the internet. Look for words on this website, right? That's what we would do. So we want it to focus there. One other thing that's really important here is like little fact that folks don't know is just because you use Word doesn't mean that your document is accessible. Okay. And formatting has to do with tagging, not with aesthetics. Okay. We have to use the system, the correct system of formatting. And here I have just a little infographic, right? H1, the headline tags. The reason these were created for the internet, as well as documents, is because of screen readers. So like we need to, this is how information is parsed and understood. Otherwise it'd just be, a flow of endless information. So you might not love the aesthetics of these things, but you got to do them, right? We got to actually make this happen. And one thing I recommend to folks is instead of relying on doc files, even if they're on OneDrive, right? And you're serving them, like that might be very convenient for you, but use Pages, okay? Pages are a lot simpler to manage. You can move them around, simple copy and paste, right? That might be annoying, sorry. But honestly, like investigate the use of Pages, because the more stuff you have on Canvas that's modular, the better the accessible experience is going to be for the student. Okay, because here's the deal: not only does the accessibility reader that they have to penetrate Canvas and all the different things that you have, all your pages, assignment sheets, quizzes, rubrics, like all the stuff we type into Canvas that gets saved on Canvas, versus our documents. The documents is then a whole nother layer. It can penetrate all of those, right? But again, if you keep everything inside of Canvas, I don't know, maybe it comes down to convenience for you. I've not found any strengths in keeping stuff open in Word that I can't just open right up in Canvas and work there. Yeah, so I would recommend that happen. It just makes things so much easier, especially because like in assignment sheets, for example, I may want to reference certain things that are around the course, right? That as a hyperlink, I can just click really quick on text, and then now I have that where I can then grab course links. So that would be an advantage. It gives you just more inside of Canvas creation, but maybe you're not there yet, but work on it. Okay. I'm telling you, you're going to have less you do it issues. And you've got more inaccessible documents out there than you probably would like to see. It's true. So just things to check out. You can always also ask, unless you're not swift with formatting and you need some help, ask GPT to format it for you to be accessible and copy and paste it. You can do that. Okay. Right back into Word, or Copilot, even better, right? Microsoft product to Microsoft product. It works really nicely. One thing I did have as an issue is I found that my project sheets, since they're Tilt, and Tilt has a lot of things, and especially that mine are very tutorial driven, I have a lot of steps. So sometimes we're scrolling for a long time. That's not my favorite part. Also, sometimes links overlap each other, if they're too close together in text. So that's something I noticed. So I put my links in lists, and then those lists have clear markers on them, and then that allows me to keep that from happening. But I had to go through that a couple times. I put a nice set of links for students, and they were all overlapping each other, and it was a nightmare, right? Of course, it's students go look at that stuff, and it's when they need it, and it's not working. It was a little bit of an annoyance. But anyway, so here's what Tilt project sheets look like. And you can see this can get long. You can really be very detailed, especially if you've got specific specifications. I have to put pixels and dimensions. This final project I'm doing with students for motion graphics has 3 different pixel dimensions. So as you can imagine, the list gets long as time goes on, but done like that for you. Okay, really done very fast. Formatting, I'm pulling this not just from any old place, but WCAG, WCAG, that is the standard for formatting, right, on the internet, and goes with the Rehabilitation Act in the 70s, right? So just like we have wheelchairs and rails and Braille and things like that, that extends also to electronic spaces. This is an extension of the classroom. So we've got to make sure that that happens. So this is UDoIT, right? Everybody's got this on their Canvas. I've activated mine here. It's just a screenshot, but you'll go down to settings and you'll see it listed, UDoIT Cloud, and you'll turn that on, and then say save, and then it becomes part of your stuff. And then you can come in and start to look through all the issues that you have. I got a pretty nice score here. Okay. As you can see, my errors, my biggest ones, are scanning YouTube videos. So I'm figuring that out. All the YouTube videos I've picked, because YouTube has captions on almost everything. It can't be that I found the 26, right? The perfect ones. A lot of the times I've been noticing is that like the error comes up while the ads are showing, and the ads don't have captions. So yeah, but you can look at this dashboard and start to go through your things. And I'm telling you, right, you're not going to see issues if you have pages, because that's the thing, is that like UFixit can immediately edit pages. That's it. That's the seller. That's the killer right there. My Word people who are just like, I'm just going to keep using Word. Well, if you want to, that's fine. If your workflow is tight, don't mess it up, right? But look at and appreciate that if you do play with UDoIT, UFixit, you've got this built-in accessibility option, and it will fix the pages, the assignment sheets, the rubrics all directly here, which is fabulous. So check this out, spend a little time with it, run the scanner, knock out 5 things on an afternoon, cool, come back, do some more. And before you know it, you're going to have like a clean course. And when the course is clean, then base all your future courses on this, right? It's just going to really just be amazing. And see if you can then even use structure here for other courses, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel, each time. That's important to really kind of appreciate how Canvas works. And it's a lot of databases, it's a lot of lists of things, but like once you start putting data into it, things become really modular and fixable, and it's a great learning management system. It becomes very true to its name. All right, rubrics. So rubrics, really wonderful. And simple thing that I got to do with them was that there is here we go, show you guys. There is a template. This was like one of my first experiments. There's a template that you can go under the import rubrics. It says download the template. And then when you open it, it is a CSV, a comma separated values list, which is this. And because I opened it up a CSV in Excel, it showed it to me as a matrix. So one thing that is really helpful to understand is that CSVs, tables, Excel docs, databases are all compatible types, files, right? There's no table file, but like there are databases, right? SQL, Excel, XML, CSVs, JSON, right? Like there's all these different types of ASP, there's all these different types of database matrices out there. So if you can kind of grasp like, oh, well, we're just dealing with a bunch of matrices, then all of a sudden you have tools and you have knowledge, right? Like we've all worked with Excel before. So I opened the rubric up here in Excel. So you could literally just take this and type away at it, right? Like that's one thing you should just do immediately is don't try to make a rubric from scratch. That is like painful. It's like painting with a toothbrush, a wall. It's just going to take you forever and it's going to look terrible. I lose patience very quickly for that. So sorry. But doing it this way gave me greater control. I could quickly navigate and find and replace, and do all this stuff like very swiftly. But I also said, well, what if because, GPT does tables really well. So I said, let me do this. So here's what I did with GPT, these little screen grabs. I used the RAG feature, okay? And RAG is retrieval augmented generation, which is essentially like you take any LLM and then you give it a file, right? You give it a PDF of poems. You give it a student handbook, like a codes and restrictions manual, like the DSM, stuff that like is really thick and coded, right? So in this case, using RAG, I was able to upload the CSV, and I started to kind of ask it questions like I wanted to show it the format. So if I thought, well, if I give it the CSV and ask it, does it understand the format? Maybe I can have it generate new stuff with that format. That was my immediate thinking. And that's always a pain in the butt, is like the formatting of stuff matters. That's why they give you this CSV to mess with. Okay, so that's what I did. I asked it, like, can you do this with the file? And if you look, I said, can you create a new rubric table using the formatting in the attached document? I want to add the following criteria. So I gave it new instructions. Add this new stuff to the document while you're generating. And then I say, I did a 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And I said, please add a 0 to 4 scoring system for each category, right? With one of them equaling 0. And I said, ask me questions if you need more information or don't understand something. This is also a critical thing to do when you're working with GPTs, is not only do you want it to like become something, right? I told it at the beginning, I guess I didn't show you here, just that it is a education expert, right? It's a teacher. It understands UDL, it understands tilt, accessibility, right? All those different things. Assessment, boom. And by it having a good grasp and a finite focus as to where it was going, plus I then said, instead of just giving me stuff, because this is what you do, you ask GPT something. This is the hammer use of the screwdriver, right? You ask GPT to do something, and it's like an exchange. It's like you bought like crack knowledge in the alley, right? You're just like, money, take, go. And that's what it's going to do. It's just going to like, oh, you asked me one question, I'm just going to just give you what I think you need. But if you then tell it, hey, if you're unsure of something or there's a decision, because that's what's going on, is like the computer is analyzing tokens and it's starting to see probability of like how words might flow together. So it could end up at crossroads at certain points or multiple decision tree avenues, right? Like, where does it go? So if it's not sure, maybe even for a second, it understands that language, right? It might be in its evaluation helped by you by doing that. So anyway, just something really important, because if you look on the next page here, it then gives me, here's what I see in all those things. And then here it says, to confirm before I build your updated version, right? It's like the dentist saying, okay, let's make sure this is the tooth we're pulling. It's important, right? Are you the right person who I'm pulling a tooth of today? What is your date of birth and all that confirming information? It seems redundant, right? It's like, doc, you know me clearly, but it's like, no, we have to make sure, because before we build pull a tooth or build a building or put pipe in a place, we got to know, right, exactly that it's where it's going to be. So I like that it asks and it says, right, should it have all these things? Do you want me to put stuff in the thing, right? Like these might be seemingly stupid, but I didn't think of them at first. But the AI said, hey, we're going to need this kind of information for this rubric to be complete, right? So even now I'm going, hey, you know what? Next time when I do ask it, I'm going to say, populate it with these things. I'm going to be more in control as to like what I want. And because it just taught me about what it's thinking about. Okay, so let's see now how that goes. And notice I'm very nice to my AI. When they become our overlords, you'll see. Okay, you'll see. So if you go back, you'll see that they asked me questions, and then I actually responded with the numbers, so it corresponded with what it asked me. Right? Makes sense. You do that with email to your clients, your students, that sort of thing. If they make lists, yeah, right. All good. Makes good sense. And then here it's now showing me in tabular form what the rubric will look like. And you know, the rubric name, rubric 1, it has to be there because it's all part of rubric 1. And then all the different pieces are put in. I can't slide this for you to see, but then once we were able to take that file, you'll see here, what did I do? Yeah, it asked me to make a file for Canvas. And I had it, I pasted it right back into the template because it's a CSV, right, which is an Excel doc. And then I uploaded that template back, augmented by AI, and there it is, right? It's got all my good stuff all laid out perfectly. Okay. And you can see how I understand and evaluate work, right? Like when we're looking at compositional balance here, I've got exceeds. Yep. It meets or exceeds expectations in all aspects. And the longer description talks about what balance is, so the students understand that. Minor issues, some issues, and I enumerate. So like if I can point to, hey, here are 2 things or 3 things or whatever that are not working in your piece, this is why I've scored it lower, right? Again, very hard to do, but this is how we can judge mechanics. I also have in this breakdown, there is something about creativity. So yeah, that might be for a future event, right? We can talk about how we manage creativity, okay? But yeah, the more things I can enumerate, the better. So if I can count stuff, or if I can say what I'm looking at and spell that out, students know exactly what I'm looking for. And you know, we look at examples, that sort of stuff. They get exposure, and you know, if they stay within those parameters as to what is a success in that space, we've done a good job. We can actually say there it is. You know, so quizzing, right? All right, this is a fun one. I'll do more showing with this one than anything else, but this is important to understand OCR. So OCR is optical character recognition, okay? And I use the Apple Notes app to make that occur. So on your phone, I believe there's an Android version too, but I'll show you here in the next slide. So the way it works is you take the Notes app and you click on the camera. You see this little camera icon right here, and you can take it over text or anything like that, anything else. And once you've got that open, you'll see that the Notes app will start to transcribe what it sees. So I have this textbook. It's the best textbook ever. It's now out of print. So sad. But I wanted students weren't reading. So I wanted to do some knowledge checks, and because I realized that's a great motivator. And yeah, I was like, oh, so at first I started making quizzes very manual way. And I had done OCR because I was like, oh, well, at least with OCR, I could have digital text. I could kind of, you know, it'd be easier to glean some questions, that sort of stuff. I could do find and replace. It just made moving through the text more fluid. And then I decided, well, wait a minute. Since I made this to text, I can then feed it to GPT and then just have it, right, ask it, can you make me quizzes? So started doing that, got really good at prompting. And you can see this is the output of what we got. And essentially, GPT can make a QTI file. So I downloaded this quiz on the Bauhaus movement. I had it give me the answers just here, but then I said, can you give me a QTI file that doesn't have answers, right? Well, actually, my bad. When you create the QTI, it tells it what the correct answer is. So it goes in with all the questions and which one's the correct one. You know what I'm saying? Like you have to set all that inside of Canvas. That's annoying. That takes time. So that's the value here of using that QTI file. Now QTIs are a little bit different than other, like I just showed you with the rubrics. To do QTI, you have to go to import content, where if you've ever imported a previous semester's course into a new one, you go here, and then in that big selection where you would normally choose copy a Canvas course, or maybe even like an output, or if you've ever migrated from a different platform to this one, there's QTI zip file, and then you'll want to upload that. You'll get that zip file from GPT, and then once it's here, right? Oh, that's it. Sorry. It will now then show up, as I mentioned, as a quiz. Oh, I don't have a picture of the quiz. Sorry about that. But yes, so really handy, and just involves the use of the phone in addition to AI. So it's OCR with the phone, copy and paste the notes into GPT, right? Make the quiz, generate the QTI file, edit it. Obviously look on GPT, make sure everything's correct. You can open up the QTI file, I think with Text Editor Notepad, and you can make changes there, which is really straightforward, really fast. But then the QTI file, saved again, can be uploaded to Canvas, and then now you can deploy that quiz in no time, right? So less typing on Canvas and more local, right? More the creation of the quiz, fashioning it, polishing it locally, and then putting it onto Canvas, goodbye. And it works. That's really, really fabulous. So I was able to do that, and yeah, I could do a couple at a time. So I would scan, maybe 10, 15 pages, and then all of a sudden have that text document, take care of like sometimes 1 or 2 chapters. They were not gigantic chapters. And that's important, right? If you got a lot of text, that's probably going to take you a while. We just had no digital version of our text. It just didn't exist. You had to look in the book, or you had to look at like online, after you typed in the name of the thing you were looking at. There was no digital companion, nothing like that. So not accessible for students unless there was something that they could use that would read the physical text in a book, right? So handy, just handy as far as getting that stuff going. All right, fun thing here was the creation of this. So if you have only have a free version of the GPT account, which most people do, you cannot make custom GPTs. Okay, but if you do pay for GPT, $20 a month, right? And we're talking about equity, making it so that students of all backgrounds, right, income levels can access AI tools. Here's a good pivot for that, right? So we have Copilot, right? Copilot currently, the one we have, is as powerful as GPT 4.0, right? So that means that it can do RAG, so it can take in documents, it can do image analysis, and now it can even spit out images, right? Copilot's pretty good at it. So we should be leveraging that over saying, use GPT, right? Because you can save the student $20 a month by letting them use Copilot. Plus, because we have the higher version of Copilot, we can train agents. So I created an agent for my students to use this semester called Rux, and it's Rex UX. I know, brilliant name. We're working on it. We may ask Rux to come up with a better name later. We'll see. But really cool type of thing, because I was trying to create more conversation chatbots, right? I created a client chatbot with this guy named Tim, who owns a ice cream parlor called Scoopies, and it was more funny than it was, but it was it was helpful, really helpful to learn, right, about like this type of thing, and the students got a kick out of it, in other words. But when I made Rux is like a little bit more helpful, like I guess because it's client, and then here's some expert kind of like, it's guiding them, so they engage it differently. But anyhow, we put this together. This took me about 30 minutes to make, right? So you're able to log into Copilot for free on your Microsoft apps. So if you pop up your email, right, and go to apps, the 9 dots, and then that will take you to where your apps are. There's like PowerPoint online. If you've ever written a Microsoft Word document online or used Excel, that's where we're going. And there's a PowerPoint. You can actually pin it so it'll stick to the top of your navigation, and it will become something that you use often. And in the right-hand corner, there is a section. Actually, here it is. There's a section that shows my Rux agent and the experiment that I did with it. So where it says create an agent and get agent, that's where you go and you can build. So get agents, there's some great ones. There's like ones that are great at science, ones that are great at law, ones that are like great study buddies that are just like happy and fun, some that are more serious. You know, you can make them into anything you want. It's really, really, really amazing. So when you're creating an agent, you come in here and you can use a template if you want to. So it'll kind of have a basis. I didn't use a template. I just wanted to start from scratch. And I told it, I want you, you're a UX expert. You're totally skilled in usability, aesthetics, accessibility, and unique technology achievements. I said, you're a great tutor. I said, don't tell me anything, right? Do not give me answers. That was a very important thing because I wanted to share this bot with the students and I wanted them to get good practice with it. So, you know, I turned on that do not give me answers feature, I guess, right? By just telling it in its description. And then in the instructions, you can actually do some cool things. You can create some pre-made prompts. So these are like prompts that show up as soon as somebody loads the Rux agent. So one of the ones I made was give me like a deep critique on a website, and then I had it like really give a nice balanced critique in terms of strengths, weaknesses, and you know, opportunities and threats type of thing. And that's like a very positive way for folks to critique. In other words, they come up with a criticism, but then they also offer a suggestion, right? Like that's how that moves the needle is for folks is you can tell them like, hey, this ain't working. Tell them why the best you can, but then offer a way to fix it, right? To solve the problem. That's why we do that. So, you know, I often very much appreciate critique with solution, right? Even if it's a bad solution, it's a thought, right? Because that's the next natural place for development in creativity and problem solving is to acknowledge a problem, right? And then work to fix it, right? So early solution, divergent solutions thinking is important, even if it's rubbish. You know, you got to get it out there because sometimes rubbish, you know, that's how we get Geico Gecko because it rhymes. You know, people were probably tired in a meeting and they were like, why not the Geico rhinoceros? You know, and it was like Geico Gecko. It makes so much sense. But yeah, anyway, that sounds like an idea that came at the at the 11th hour. So Copilot agents, you know, you can make these Victorian literature experts. You can make these chemistry experts. You know, it's how strong is Copilot is really what you want to have it do. The last thing was that I had given it the websites of like really the standards for these things I'm talking about, right? WCAG, UDL, you know, places that are going to be exemplary for like where we'd go do research essentially, right? For this information. And then I did it with my own website and it gave me a really beautiful report, right? Some of it was a little vague, but some things were like, oh, okay. Because it allowed me, you know, it reinforced stuff I knew and it's fine. For students, that might be the first time they're hearing these types of things. So it gives them, you know, a place to say, hey, Mike, you know, what's this about? We can have a conversation and I can look at their chat. You know, their chat can be output up here. There's tools to do that. And then we again can have a discussion about how that went versus, you know, the AI experience being very isolated. You know, a lot of times people will try AI late at night and in a secret place. And there's like this weird shame. It's like, just show it, share what you thought, you know, I don't know. But anyway, fun, right? To play with this. And I think anybody can try it. If you just Google, honestly, like Copilot, how to create an agent, or ask Copilot itself, how do you walk me through creating a Copilot and agent? And it will do it. It'll tell you all the steps and ask you like what kind you want and all that. Really, really handy. Okay. But worth experimenting and have your students create agents, have them create one as a project that's like an expert in something that that you can use that's useful, or that like is again an ethical way to help the study of the subject that you're exploring. You know what I mean? It can be really, really good, and make that as transparent as possible. Have everybody show what they did, and that's all, right? You'll see. It'll be interesting. All right, and here's the last experiment that I had done with JD. So thanks to JD, who attended the lecture last time. JD had approached me with a unique question. And it was strange. We had met in like an alley about this, right? Because JD was feeling a little shame because JD was interested in two things. I want to be able to do pattern recognition analysis of student work, but I don't want to use the LLMs that are out there, right? Because number one, FERPA, right? I could potentially put in identifying information, which can be really hurtful, right, for students. That would be a violation of FERPA. And number two is intellectual property, the sanctity and protection of data. These were two key things that JD had approached me with. And free, okay? That was another thing, is can we do this free, right? So I went home, I thought about it, and the answer was yes, yes, and yes. So I had been experimenting with this software that you and I and everybody can download. It's called LM Studio, which is Language Model Studio. And it allows you to download clones and even distributed examples, open source examples of the best LLM libraries that are out there at the current moment. So those are the three things. Was FERPA, so we got to keep it on hard drives only, right? Intellectual property. The reason we say this is that like chatbots are learning from us. They are, right? They're growing. They're getting smarter all the time, especially if they're commercial chatbot. So every interaction is being recorded, right, about all of us. Just like cookies and things have been taking our interaction, our data for, decades now. So that's happening. So these are really important, and again, free, that Jen was interested in, right? Could we do this? So we did. We met, and I gave her a demo of like how that all went. So LM Studio, let's check that out really quick. Okay. Here, we'll jump back to that in a second. So here's LM Studio. I have it on my Mac, and what it does is, we'll jump to the, okay, is it lets you on this page, this is the libraries page, the models. You can come in here and you can add models from different websites, like this website. This is huggingface.co. So Hugging Face, I know, wonderful name, is like probably the flagship repository, place you go to search all of the latest and greatest models, okay, that are open source and available. And there's one for every kind: images, video, sound, text, everything. Literally everything is here. You can see like there's some weird stuff like object detection. Like if you're making an app that needs to find mangoes, right, and identify mangoes positively on a camera, there's software that's here that lets you do that, right? That's what AI has given us. So jumping back here, and there is a link here that I've put, but huggingface.co is where you go for this. So I've downloaded quite a few of these different libraries, right? I do like the Llama. I was investigating a lot of Llama because it has RAG capability, right? RAG was something that Jen was interested in, JD was interested in, where we could upload documents. So we had said, could we then take students' documents, compile them, put them to one, and then have the RAG analysis go through it, and then give a patterns report, right? Like, specifically on grammar, specifically on structure of essay. These are the things that JD and I we're talking about is the next stages. Is like, okay, now how can we look at these kinds of patterns? It could be like really amazing what we can do here. So, this was just a quick demo. I had uploaded our faculty handbook, and I'd asked it what our social media policy was, and there isn't one. But just something that you can do with RAG. And this is something that I kind of started thinking of later to help with the experiment that JD and I were getting into, and like ways to examine writing. And I thought, some of these are cool ideas. I had just asked GPT to explain this, and based on what I was, what we were talking about, and there it was, right? These are the things that it had all said, and I thought, okay, some of these are interesting. Because they're like logic, mechanical writing pattern things that like not everybody is so attuned to, and would take a very long time for a human being to do that in such detail across all the students' writing. So, I mean, there's some stuff that like we could really up our game. We could really make assessment something amazing. But we need to be very great orchestrators of how all these patterns are grafted, and what they mean, and things like that. But it'd be really cool to start thinking about them. So that's where we stand with this, right? With using LM Studio, downloading one of the Llama models, and then feeding it some information. I've now got a free local, right? Meaning not connected, so FERPA safe, and also intellectual property safe, and free, right? I said free already. Service here that's like ready for me to just use. I think it's worth at least an experiment, y'all, right? To see what you could gain from it. If it's total junk, well, you spent nothing, right? Except a little time, and maybe you learned a thing or two about how this tech actually functions, right? And how it could serve you. So thanks to JD, and appreciate how JD really elevates a lot of the ethical issues and implications that come from this. It's shaped my thinking, so this experiment's ongoing. We'll come back, we'll report with like new things that we're dealing with, right, as they unfold. Okay, so Hugging Face, check out Hugging Face, great website. You can actually even demo some of the models free on the demo page of each of them, right? So if you wanted to try the Llama model, the latest clone, you could pop it open and ask it questions. There's like a fast query button. So neat. Other things that AI are really good at that, I think we should take advantage of. And, really it's just like, saying before, is this being more strategic with our assessment, with our feedback to students. I believe that there's a way that we could add this, not replace us, but add this to a greater feedback and assessment conversation that we can have with students. And I think then can be very useful for us as data, right? Because if we have this kind of intermediary system that can really help us be modular with this, and we can run it local, so it's not then like all the things I just showed you using LM Studio can all run local, okay? And you're not needing like high-end models. You can use some of the everyday models to achieve many of the things that we're talking about. But yeah, I like this example that I had picked out of from some of the AI courses that I had taken. It said, I have a student struggling with juxtaposition, right? So that's something that like we teach in graphic design, where you juxtapose things together. I could say, I could tell a little bit about this student without telling too much about the student. And I can say, what pathways could I use to help them understand, right? And it's just this like roll of the dice to kind of understand different ways to think about. It's just useful, right? Like a lot of us really upping our game is and offering students more options in terms of ways to learn, right, through multiple senses, is being creative, right? We have to really come up with great ideas about like how to do cool stuff in the classroom, and that like that's the stuff that we like really love sharing. So again, the good partner in doing this, you don't have to tell it everything that you're doing, but just I'm working on this idea, help me think through these different pathways, ask me questions. It's a great conversation partner in that way. Another thing is like, make it matter. Like, sorry, but like some concepts in our majors, people don't care, right? Like in the way that it's currently taught, like there are certain things in algebra that like if you had told me really how they worked in the world, I would have believed you so much more and cared so much more. I mean, I'm just speaking from my own experience, but like, I'll give you an example. Like my kid is, we need to strengthen her reading comprehension right now to be really great for EOGs coming up. So she gets so bored with some of the reading comprehension stories, and like, I know they're designed to do that, so to get kids off track to see if they can really hold strong, right, with boring stuff. So what I do to help her scaffold is I ask GPT to rewrite one of the stories that she was studying, but to make it with characters from her favorite show. And she all of a sudden was like, oh, now I understand kind of like what this is about. And it made then the boring story, where she wasn't relating to the characters or the events in any way, shape, or form, like so much more accessible, right? And I found that like after practicing those, she was then so much better at doing the other ones, just because like she got a rhythm, you know. I don't know how else to describe it, but making relevancy matter is big, you know. When I teach my QLC, I have to make what I'm talking about relevant to students who are not design majors. Why should they care? Why should they give a hoot about what I'm talking about? They're not going to be designers, right? But when I show them, and after asking GPT about things, you know, I've learned now about how prevalent design is in their world, and I can have a conversation with them about it now, right? And I can send them and say, hey, why don't you ask the questions, because they know their world better. And all of a sudden now the GPT, and I ask them, come back with those answers. And it's like, oh yeah, I didn't think about that. All of a sudden it's like we see the holes in our thinking, right? The finer edges, right? We can clean up. Remixing formats, right? Like in graphic design history, when I teach about Italian Futurism, which is a controversial art movement, the manifesto is a little tough to read. So how about if we had it as a song from Broadway's Hamilton, right? Or how about we made a puppet show about Federalist Papers, you know, like that, just multimodal, multi-play of formats. You know, this is where you get those creative ideas. That's what I'm talking about, is like, this is where we need to step up as educators and be creative. So yes, please, you have permission, right? Use these systems to make those fun things happen, right? And then riff. You're going to then be divergent, going, whoa, right? And then convergent as the editor, saying, that's not a good idea. That would be impractical for my students. That's for kids. You know, you'll start to then snip, and you'll find the goodies, okay? But you don't even know what the goodies are yet. Get out there and you know, use this as a way to get deeper and more broad and you know, really have a second brain. And then last is like, okay, when you find that stuff out, let's make it playable. Let's come up with new academic and learning activities that like expand our horizons, you know, and matter, you know, and tactility. One thing that's really important, here's a really important thing that I thought of that like everybody should be using AI for right now, is whenever we have icebreakers in school, right, in class, y'all, I've been teaching a long time, right? Like 20 years now. And like, I've always had corny icebreakers, and I've just relied on corniness. But then I thought, man, wouldn't it be great if like the icebreaker really mattered with like what we were doing in the class? So I started to then think like, man, it'd be great. So I would challenge you, like me, is ask it to come up with icebreakers that are connected to your objectives, right? That are connected to the project, connected to the wisdom or the greater practices or the superheroes, so to speak, of your discipline, your major, right? Just get that relevancy. Again, that's pattern recognition. That's something that AI can do really well, that then we're expected to come up with as being just great, you know, like just those creative, be creative, y'all. I'm telling you, you're going to do this stuff, and that pattern is going to all of a sudden start to emerge. You're going to become wise and literate to it, and you're going to start to see it everywhere. And then you're going to build, and you're going to demonstrate that behavior, and then you're going to allow your students to do the same. It's awesome. Okay. List of tools of things that folks can use. My local use on the right-hand side, LM Studio for text-based things, like I was showing my experiment with JD. Diffusion B is the thing I use, as well as Draw Things and Automatic 1111. These are all free image making tools. Some of them are varying skill level and whatnot. And then on the other side, internet-based things that are available to everybody. There's some that are more accessible than others. Obviously, the pay for GPT, not accessible to everybody. The free one is our Microsoft Copilot. That is free for students until they graduate. Google Notebook LM, I would encourage folks to try that. That one does really good with RAG, but I would use public information because the RAG is stored on the internet. So if it's your own material, be careful, right? GitHub Copilot, if you're a coder out there, or if you're a macro creator for various things, or you handle data, I would use GitHub's Copilot, right? If you're writing some Python scripts, JavaScript scripts, Excel macros, right? Database queries, all sorts of stuff like that. That's your spot. It's a master of coding languages. We use it all the time for HTML, CSS, JavaScript, PHP, and MySQL in the graphic design program, as well as other things, right? Our animation expressions, graphical scripts for Adobe Illustrator. It's a lot of amazing application of code these days. Right now, your Acrobat PDF from Adobe has an AI bot on it. It is connected to the internet, so just be okay with that. And it is subscription based. And then Firefly, which is Adobe's AI tool, makes video, makes photos, some other things too. It's starting to really crank out like pre-made templates and stuff. It's going to be a brave new world, friends. Excited about that though, right? Now I want to learn all these things instead of just being a user of whatever Adobe gives me. I want to master all of the different things that you can make. That, in my opinion, is that's what I share with students as far as making sure that they see themselves not as just the user, but as the orchestrator, right? The grand conductor. I want you to feel the same way as a grand conductor of these tools, right? At least have an understanding about how they are moving. And then at the bottom here, and this is a part of that PDF, is a link to Future Tools. FutureTools.io is a fabulous website that I go to see the latest and greatest AI tools. You can search them and sort them, and there's like buy free or paid or whatever. It's just just explore. There's plenty there for you to get lost in. Also included is this handy ChatGPT cheat sheet from AIfire.co. It's one of the ones I found to be the most useful in that it does the RTF, the role task format system. There's all sorts of different acronym systems for ChatGPT, but I found this one to be the most useful. It's the system that I learned in my various AI courses from UPenn and other places. So I really liked how that approached. And then there's some other things in here that are just really like some prompt examples for you to try. Even things like here, it talks about things like setting restrictions on what the bot does and does not do. So if we have the ability to create agents, we really now can make GPT and LLMs do what we need it to and kind of get rid of some of the extra fluff and like the unneeded functionality, that like we found frankly distracting and, not useful. This allows us to keep these things useful. And evolve. I've also included the GPT exercises that I did with the course that you can as well. There's 2 of them, and it requires that you have ChatGPT. I believe you could probably do these with Copilot as well, but this one is talking about the first thing, which was, if you saw on that GPT list, which was role. So you assign the role of the AI to do what it is that you need it to do. And you can see there's a whole bunch of stuff in here. And of course, these are examples. You could get even more specific with it. So here, this one's talking about statistical regression and explaining that concept. You can even say, like, teach it to me as if I was very young, right? So here, persona, you're a plant biologist explaining photosynthesis to high school students with some basic science knowledge. So right there, that'll tune the level of depth that goes into, right? Hopefully based on some academic standards, something you can tune up. If you notice that its output isn't correct with what your knowledge is regarding the level, you can adjust that. And then of course, save this chat, like keep it as a chat you use later on. And then understand like what you wrote and keep your prompts so you can understand like how your prompting is affecting and shaping the way that GPT's conversation is unfolding. That's really important. Okay. And then this is a little bit different than the persona one. This is a chain of thought. So chain of thought is kind of like tutoring, where you can, and kind of creative collaboration where you can go back and forth. So notice here that it says create a lesson plan, right, for a college level negotiations class. So you can see like, oh, well, what, like take your knowledge, your expertise of like what and tell it like I want a 101, and you can even tell it there is a 102 or 103 course. So that helps it understand, oh, well, you're probably covering advanced topics later. We might want to make this 101 course house just this section of what college level negotiations is, let's just say, for an example. So you can do that. Secondly here, right, notice draft a basic outline of key topics, and you can work with the AI to start to comb things. So you can say, like you could say, I love this outline, but would you please switch this with this? Or this is going to be too advanced. Could we then, like this has been helpful for me as I've planned out courses, is starting to think about, all right, like I've got 15 weeks and I'll literally tell the GPT like what our actual calendar at the university looks like. So what that means is like, we have this holiday here where we don't meet this week. Finals is this time. And then what I'll do is I'll then say, I have this many projects. I need to hit these many objectives. And we've got this many weeks, and these are the dates that we're not going to meet, right? So it like fully understands everything that's going on. And through that chain of thought conversation prompt, I'm able to now comb and shape this schedule to be actual, right? So I could have it think through, well, like it understands that we meet twice a week for this many hours. And it'll ask me to emphasize, like, what would you like to emphasize, skill wise? And it's really helped me out, right? Because I could say, I need the final to last 4 weeks worth of class, right? I need that much time to have the students be working in class, out of class, and then turn in a final exam or final project during exam week. It helped me strategize that, help me plan that out. And it's just, can't tell you how thoughtful these things have been in terms of like, it just knows the basics. It's just doing math at that point and then planning all that stuff out with, time brackets. And then it just lets me go from like thinking, oh, how am I going to plan all that out, to going, oh, well, what if we just move this? All right, there's not enough here. And because I have something to work with, I really respond well to manipulatives, right? Folks out there understand manipulatives, right? If you're in education, give somebody something to model, to play with, that they can manipulate and they'll learn on it. So that's what I'm interested in. That's the training wheels. And then we take training wheels off, right? We start to do things where training wheels become not useful anymore, right? Or the bumpers out of the bowling alley, and we can then get the ball down the alley without getting it stuck in the gutter. We have to scaffold and then take the scaffold away and let it develop. That's part of those creative muscles to develop. So that's a second exercise to play with. Came from that course. Again, I would really encourage you guys to take that course. It is awesome. It's simple. It's about 5 hours, $30, $31.99 with tax. Worked out. Okay. It worked out. Helped me really think past these different things. But I'm headed into new directions. Definitely want to play more with the chat bots. Like I'm down if folks want to experiment and like do a chat bot customization together. I think that would be incredible for all of us to make different chatbots that do things that help our individual majors, right? I've talked to my colleagues in interior design and talked about the International Building Code, which is a standard manual. It's about that thick, keeps tables from falling over. And also that they're going through an accreditation and they have to abide by standards. Again, these are just patterns, right? Jordana has to sit and look at like current current patterns of the major and then the pattern that's set as a standard, and then make sure that those are overlapping, right? Again, the software could incredibly, be that second brain, that checker, that Jordana could use to really accelerate the process and not make it so burdensome. Um, and yeah, I want to investigate more ethical based models. Right now, a lot of models are not ethically based. They're based on copyrighted material, and that's been a hurt. I've not enjoyed that because I would love to be able to, make fully copyrightable things, but I just don't have a supercomputer to do that. So I've been seeking out and using models that like are the most ethically sourced that they can possibly be, and that's hard. They don't do well without having like the full sanctity of the internet, as a image training on it, like others do that are so beautiful, but still those images are not usable. They're not your copyrighted material. Model fine tuning, right? I'd really love to. There is a way to train models, so that way you don't have to use RAG and all that stuff. You could just train the model on documents and give it, let it just be smart about those things in its own brain. So that's kind of the difference between RAG and fine tuning, is that when you fine tune the model, like all those sources that I would normally use to RAG feed it are already built in. So it's part of its matrices. So it actually starts to build around those ideas, whereas RAG is useful for it in that moment, right? It's like, it's like an application, like you just load that application, it kind of does, versus the entire computer does all these other things. So it works a little bit like that, which is nice. So that's something I'm interested. And then more AI agents, like not just ones that are chatbots, but ones that can do tasks, right? So like, what if I could make a chatbot that could like analyze all the student work and then fill out all the rubrics? You know what I mean? And allow me a point of intervention where I could come in and look at those rubrics and see if I agree, and then read what the feedback is, or do my own feedback assessment and then look at it and go, oh, wow, okay. And then hand a student 2 reports, let's just say, right? Here's what the computer said, and here's what I said. That could be wonderful, right? And again, like, I'm just curious about ways we can up our assessment with this. I'd love to learn from folks if you've got ideas. It really, really is. So it's just some quick takeaways, right? Again, right? We've done a great job scaring ourselves. So like, we should be having regular discussions. Knowledge is the one thing to dispel fear. Okay. I feel like sometimes we speak from fear, and we should be speaking more from knowledge. And, not that we shouldn't speak our fears, but like we shouldn't put our fears forth as, like, let's really look at stuff. Like I get there's fear and there's emotion behind things, but let's really look at stuff. Let's understand why you're afraid, right? Like just unpack things. But let's do it in a way that like others can access, so that fear isn't spread. Okay. That's the thing, is like, I don't want to make people scared. That's not helpful, right? Like I want to empower people. So I want to teach you how to do stuff, right? And then give you the permission and the agency to go do it. And then the rest is up to you. Okay. You're an adult. Mazel tov. Let's start to emphasize like what AI is really good at. That's part of that behavior modeling, rather than talk about what it's not good at. Okay. We all know and agree that it does see work. Okay. So good. Right. Let's say, and keep telling people output is not acceptable. If you're using that for output, you're using it in the wrong way. Right. There are ethical ways to make things happen. And I'm saying here that like ideation, I think ideation's ethical. Okay. I think it really is. If you really want to train somebody to become really strong with ideas, if you've got a method that like we can do that has no AI, that allows us to get the same amount of output of divergent thoughts, please send me a note. I would love to learn it. Okay. I've looked at many a creative model, many, okay, tried them myself, participated in all sorts of creative development events and processes. I'm a nerd about it. Okay. I really am excited about it. I think this is a fantastic thing that we can do. And again, first experiment that you can try, if you're thinking, well, maybe not, Mike, have students do an experiment where they come up with ideas on their own, let them do it, and then ask the AI cold, right? Like to come up with their own ideas, compare and contrast the two, let the student then reflect on that, right? And then let the student say, here are my ideas. What do you think, right, of these? Give me a feedback on that. And then let the student think that stuff through, okay? Why can't we do that, right? Why would that violate some sort of purity law, right? If we say at any point, do not take the output of the AI as as what goes in the artifact, only there has to be human intervention, and you have to show us that through show us the chat, right? Show us the chat log. Why couldn't that now become a part of a process? I think it could be wonderful. So experiment with it. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm just throwing out I'm divergently thinking, and I've had some convergent fluctuations come in and out on it, and things I've done with my own students. But I would just say, right, see what happens, right? See, take that idea and make it better, right? That's all. This is ideation is a football, you know, and now you take it and you run. Right, we're going to the same goal line, so go to that goal line together. Okay. And yeah, right. So we get those chat logs as a way to get the buy-in. Just so then we can see things, and like allows us to become more process focused. Once we get to being process focused, we can rely less on artifacts. Okay. And the pressure that in the experience of a student, from here's the assignment to final project day where I turn it in and the many weeks in between, right? Where in that process does all of a sudden it occur to that student, oh, I should cheat, or I should use this tool to push ahead because fill in the blank. What factor has impacted that? So maybe we need to really rethink. Maybe we need to do more process oriented things, like take less emphasis. So for example, in graphic design, I have a grading system that splits 100 points across the final project, a mock-up, drafts, and then written concepts. So students have to show a development process along the way, right? They don't stray from their idea, and then all of a sudden I don't just get this thing that's like, oh, right, I've seen it move through the process. And the student shows it to me rough and broken and not animating or not interactive or not finished or not drawn. And I can then see it start to crystallize and take form. And I know then what the student is doing, and we have a dialogue happening through the process. So that way, then it's not just like, all right, it all matters at the end, right? Which I think puts a strange emphasis on things. So my friends, thank you guys very much. If you've been with me the entire time, the 2 hours, you are an AI hero. If you've played me on 1.5 times, you're a superhero. But feel free at any point, y'all, like send me a note, send me an email, reach out. Happy to talk through any questions you have, experiment with you, play through some things, you know, like think through a scenario, see if we can maybe give you a little mini lesson, you know, whatever it is. But try these experiments, see what works for you. Let me know. Okay. And keep on doing the good things you're doing for our students.